Hello everyone, I'm JEATH with Method, and today I'm talking about the new system for random upgrades to your loot coming in patch 8.3, Corruption. Since my last video talking about the first iteration of Corruption that was tested on the PTR, Blizzard has made several significant changes to the system. If you prefer to read a nice article rather than listen to some random guy drone on about it, I highly recommend Wowhead's Corruption System Overview. They've put together a nice up-to-date summary of the Corruption system. For a long time, the game has had systems whereby loot can randomly drop better than baseline loot. Warforged or Titanforged loot can drop with varying amounts of extra item level, and no downside. In 8.3, Titanforging is gone. Instead, Blizzard is introducing a radically new system for RNG upgrades to your loot called the Corruption System. Under the Corruption System, if an item drops with a Corruption upgrade, it will have one of several different powerful effects to enhance your combat capabilities, but also come with a downside that may harm you. There are two broad categories of Corruption effects that can upgrade your loot: stat effects and weapon effects. I call them weapon effects for two reasons. First, because they are for the most part large damage effects, basically adding a new weapon to your arsenal. And second, because originally on the PTR, these corruption effects were each affixed to a single weapon that only dropped from the new Ny'alotha raid. For example, the only way to obtain the Ineffable Truth corruption effect was to loot the Eye Stalk of Il'gynoth wand from Il'gynoth, the 8th boss of Ny'alotha. If you didn't play a mage, priest, or warlock, that corruption effect was simply unobtainable, no matter how powerful or fun it might be for your spec. And even if you did play a wand-wielding class, it would have only dropped from one boss on a weekly lockout. Good luck. Luckily, in the new PTR build, Blizzard unlocked at least some of the weapon effects. Just like any other corruption effect, they can upgrade any piece of 8.3 loot that you obtain. For example, my paladin looted the Ineffable Truth corruption effect, previously affixed only to one wand in Ny'alotha, on a belt. I've also looted the Infinite Star corruption effect, previously locked to an intellect sword, on both a ring and a trinket. At first glance, this may seem like a wild increase to RNG, and I've seen people complain about that, but I think it's a big improvement to the system. If a particular corruption effect is best in slot for your spec, you can obtain it from any loot that drops for you, instead of praying that you get it from only one single source, or maybe being simply unable to obtain it due to it being affixed to a weapon type that you can't equip. And fear not, if you prefer the first system, being able to obtain a particular weapon corruption effect by targeting a boss, you can still do that. All of the weapon effects still have a featured weapon they're affixed to, dropping from bosses in the Ny'alotha raid. Good luck with your coins, my friends. It's worth noting that not every weapon effect has been seen on random loot drops, so it's possible that some of them are still locked to individual weapons. The weapon effects that are confirmed to currently drop on any 8.3 loot on the PTR include Echoing Void, Infinite Star, Searing Flames, Twilight Devastation, Void Ritual, and Ineffable Truth. Echoing Void, Searing Flames, and Twilight Devastation all grant significant AoE damage effects. Echoing Void builds stacks as you DPS and will randomly proc, dealing AoE shadow damage to all nearby enemies every second until it depletes your stacks. Searing Flames builds stacks as you DPS and procs once you reach 30 stacks, blasting enemies in front of you. Twilight Devastation just has a chance to proc off of your damage, beaming all enemies in front of you. The Infinite Star is a single target damage proc. Your abilities have a chance to proc an Infinite Star, which can hit any nearby enemy, increasing the damage that particular enemy takes from future stars. This weapon effect is obviously much stronger against a single target due to the stacking damage effect. It's worth noting that on the PTR, the effect could strike enemies pretty far away from you, with whom you weren't even in combat. I expect this is a bug that will be fixed, but if it goes live in this state, beware in your Mythic Plus keys. Void Ritual is a stat proc. Your abilities have a chance to increase all secondary stats every second for 20 seconds, and your proc chance goes up if you have allies nearby also using this effect. Finally, Ineffable Truth has a chance to proc a 10-second window in which your cooldowns recover faster. Instead of the remaining cooldown diminishing 1 second for every second, during an Ineffable Truth proc, your abilities on cooldown may recover 1.5 seconds every second. The other category of corruption effects that can upgrade your loot are stat effects. There are a lot of these, but they are very straightforward. First, there are flat stat corruption gains. These corruption effects simply increase your haste, mastery, crit, versatility, avoidance, leech, or critical damage and healing. Second, there are also proc stat corruption gains. These corruption effects give you a proc, increasing your haste, crit, versatility, or mastery for set durations and magnitudes. Finally, there's a corruption effect called Glimpse of Clarity. This corruption effect is a proc that reduces the cooldown of your next spell by 3 seconds. You'll want to track this proc and be sure to use it on the spell you most want the reduced cooldown on. So far, I've talked about the good stuff, how your damage and healing is going to go up if you loot an item with a powerful corruption effect. But importantly, all of these corruption affixes come with dangerous side effects that can have a huge negative impact on combat. There is no randomness in the negative effects. You can plan for and anticipate exactly how you will be detrimentally impacted by your corruption. Every corrupted item you loot will have a purple number right under the item's other stats. That purple number will tell you how much corruption you'll gain by equipping the item. Just like any other stat, equipping another item with additional corruption will add some more to your total. There are 5 corruption thresholds. Each threshold adds an additional dangerous effect that will impact you in combat. If you equip between 1 and 19 corruption, you'll be impacted only by the first threshold, called Grasping Tendrils. This effect has a chance to slow you whenever you take damage. By itself, this effect is not particularly dangerous. At low corruption values, the slow is not very noticeable, and it can be dispelled, for example by healers or Blessing of Freedom or Tiger's Lust. If you equip 20 corruption or more, you'll also be impacted by the Eye of Corruption. Unlike Grasping Tendrils, which only procs when you take damage, Eye of Corruption procs from your own abilities. You have a chance to summon an eye for 8 seconds, which will zap you until it expires, or you flee from its zone. The more corruption you have, the bigger the zone is, and the harder the eye will hit you. You'll really start to notice your corruption with this effect, because you may have to choose between just soaking the damage, increasing your risk of death, versus moving out, which may impact the encounter due to your positioning. Moving also has obvious implications for a caster who may suffer disruptions to their casting, or a melee who may be bullied out of melee range of the target. If you equip 40 or more corruption, taking damage has a chance to summon a thing from beyond which will chase you for 8 seconds trying to hit you. If it catches you, it's going to melee you, and it hits pretty hard. This corruption effect can cause some unpredictable spike damage, especially since it can spawn right on you and melee you almost instantly. But while you may occasionally be put in danger or even die from this, you'll most likely notice it when you go over the next threshold. Because if you equip 60 or more corruption, getting hit by the thing will immediately afflict you with both Grasping Tendrils and Eye of Corruption. This effect, aptly called Cascading Disaster, is extremely dangerous, and going over this threshold will probably only be worth it for the most stout-hearted Parselords. As you can see, the thing can spawn on you and instantly melee you, triggering the Cascading Disaster. The combination of the thing's melee swing, and being dramatically slowed inside a giant, zappy eye zone is just an enormous increase in your risk of death, particularly in any kind of raid or dungeon encounter that includes unavoidable damage or other mechanics that you may be trying to avoid or execute properly. Additionally, just trying to avoid the massive damage intake you suffer from this high level of corruption is probably going to reduce your damage while you dodge all the bad stuff by as much or more than the damage you gain from the corruption effect you tried to equip. Finally, if you're crazy enough to equip over 80 corruption, you'll suffer all of the previous effects and an additional debuff that just increases your damage taken and reduces your healing received. That's right, all of the damage you take, including from the previous corruption effect, is magnified and the healers cannot save you. This effect, called Inevitable Doom, is basically just that. These negative corruption effects act as an effective soft cap on how much corrupted gear you can wear. Unlike the old Titan Forging system, where you just put on all your higher item level Titan Forged gear, with corruption you have to pick and choose what pieces to wear to grant you the best power increases you can equip, while remaining below a corruption threshold where you can reliably stay safe, survive, and not counterproductively reduce your own DPS, dodging the negative effects that come with the good ones you tried to exploit. Now there's another system in place that allows you to reduce your corruption amount with corruption resistance. Corruption resistance just reduces your corruption threshold by the value of the resistance. Your total corruption threshold is the sum of all the corruption you have equipped, minus your total equipped corruption resistance. So if you're wearing corrupted gear with a total of 60 corruption, but you have 40 corruption resistance also equipped, you only have to deal with a corruption threshold of 20. There are two sources of corruption resistance. First, using any of the new essences introduced in patch 8.3 will give you 10 corruption resistance. They don't stack, so you can only get 10 resistance from them, but that's a nice little bonus to these essences if any of them are already good for your spec. Second, the legendary cloak you obtain from the introductory patch 8.3 questline grants a minimum of 5 corruption resistance. You will be slowly upgrading this cloak over time, and as you upgrade it, your corruption resistance will go up, all the way to a cap of 50 corruption resistance. This is a very interesting system because it acts to slowly increase the soft cap on corruption over the course of the patch, effectively slowly nerfing the content as you gain more corruption resistance and the ability to wear more corruption, increasing your combat power. For example, say that you're only comfortable dealing with grasping tendrils, but you never want to have to deal with the Eye of Corruption void zones. That means you need to stay under 20 corruption. On the very first day of 8.3, you can get the legendary cloak with 5 corruption resistance. That means you can equip items totaling 24 corruption without leaving your comfort zone. Later on, you'll unlock the new 8.3 essences. Equipping one of those will push you up to 15 corruption resistance, so you can equip some more corruption items, gaining additional power, up to 34, without leaving your comfort zone. As weeks go by and you upgrade your legendary cloak, your corruption resistance will increase to the point that eventually, you can equip 89 corruption and still remain in that same comfort zone. So as you can see, as time passes, you'll naturally gain the ability to equip more and more corruption, gaining more and more power, without suffering any additional ill effects. Finally, it's important to note that you'll be able to talk to Mother in the Heartforge and ask her to simply cleanse an item of all corruption. This will remove both the positive and the negative effects of corruption, leaving you with a normal, unupgraded piece of gear. Say that you have a couple corrupted pieces that give you a corruption total that you're comfortable with, and a brand new piece of loot drops for you with more corruption on it. Maybe you don't like the new corrupted effect, and you want to keep wearing the ones you were, but the new piece is a 15 item level increase. You can just cleanse that item and wear it for its item level power increase. And there you have it, folks. Everything you need to know about the new corrupted loot system dropping in patch 8.3. What do you all think? Leave a comment with your opinion, and as always, give us some feedback by hitting the like or dislike button. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future videos. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a wonderful day.